I don't have like a specific video, but I have kind of a few videos I want to sprinkle in for chapter 16. But we spent chapter 15 talking about the Milky Way galaxy, and so in chapter 16 we're going to talk about other galaxies. But honestly, chapter 16 we're also going to kind of segue into the other galaxies sprinkled in our universe. What does our universe look like? So if part of this starts to kind of hurt your brain because we're building up to the Big Bang and all that, that's probably normal. Hurts my brain too. So one of the things about galaxies is I brought our Messier, the Messier objects in, and like I think I might have told you, I'm actually working on my own little kind of Messier chart of all the things I photographed. But even at a glance, you can see things that we've talked about this semester. We've talked about different types of clusters of stars. So these kind of look like balls, those are globular clusters. And then we have open clusters. Messier, back in the 1700s, saw a lot of things that look like open clusters. Then we see some nebula, like there's a nebula there, kind of the pretty colors. That actually is the Dumbbell Nebula. Nebula, nebula, nebula. And then what Messier saw, remember, he started this list because he was irritated, because he was looking for comets, and he saw these fuzzy things, and he's like, dude, those are not comets, let's get them out of the way and make a list. So some other fuzzy things he saw were actually galaxies. So some of Messier's objects are galaxies. That looks like a galaxy, 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 galaxy. Okay, you could take a kid and say, which one looks like galaxies? And then galaxy, right? So we're talking about other galaxies. Now, the thing about Messier objects I think is amazing is, of course, the clusters, the globular clusters and the open clusters, and the nebula, okay, those are like stuff from stars living their lives and kind of glowing now, the gas that's glowing. Those are all part of our own galaxy. Galaxies, like this, okay, other galaxies are way far away. So basically, to me, that distinguishes the Messier objects that are galaxies versus everything else. Okay. So the thing about galaxies is they didn't understand the concept of a galaxy until, like, I think it's 1924. Up till 1924, they didn't understand that actually our star is a part of a galaxy and there's other galaxies out there. But this is Messier Object 106. It's a beautiful spiral galaxy. And the caption under here actually goes back to one of the things that we talked about in Monday, is that just like the Milky Way galaxy, this galaxy too has a supermassive black hole in its center. Okay.
Wait, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a black hole in the center. How come it's like glowing, like yellow?
Yeah.
Is that like...
It's glowing kind of the same reason that remember we said that you can see where a stellar black hole is if you have a companion that's dumping on it, and we said you see the black hole because stuff forms like an accretion disk, so it's kind of that sort of friction energy. That's the glow. But you're right. It's beautiful, scary and beautiful. So as we're focusing on galaxies, actually this is a famous picture, and I think it's an early one, of the Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble Space Telescope, I don't know if it was a couple weeks or something, but do you see down here the Milky Way galaxy? Sorry, not the Milky Way galaxy. That's the Little Dipper. Big Dipper, excuse me, final answer. Here's the handle and here's the bowl of the Big Dipper. So what Hubble did was basically take that region right there where there wasn't anything and look what there is. And so my point here is basically that ain't nothing. So the Hubble Space Telescope, which can gather light from distant objects, was able to photograph that image, and those are all galaxies. She's like, wow. So there are 100 billion galaxies in our observable universe. Okay. And we'll be talking about how you classify these galaxies. There are spiral galaxies like the Milky Way and like the one we saw a minute ago. There are elliptical galaxies. Basically, elliptical galaxies, like this says, are generally reddish. And then there are irregular galaxies. So actually, one of the first videos I want to show you is how do we know how many galaxies there are in our universe. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. So there's the shape of the galaxy, okay? There's also kind of the size of the galaxy. Dwarf galaxies are more common than giant galaxies. Okay. So, cool. So, let's look at different types of galaxies. Of course, the Milky Way is a type of galaxy, a spiral galaxy. Now, the thing about spiral galaxies is they have a significant disk portion, and they have a bulge in the center, and they have a halo outside the disk. Okay. One of the things about, or I have some pictures of some galaxies. Now, these would be photographs of galaxies. The coolest way to see a galaxy that's a spiral galaxy is what we call face-on. So that's a face-on picture. Edge-on, this is more edge-on, okay? Now, we can get a sense for, this is the Sombrero Galaxy. Can you kind of see the center kind of glowing? That's that supermassive black hole in there. So the bulge, actually, we kind of get a sense of what the thing looks like by how much of a bulge it has, even if it is edge-on. We learned that some galaxies, some spiral galaxies, actually have like a bar of stars in the center, and so that's called a barred spiral galaxy. And we do think now the Milky Way is a barred spiral galaxy. So I was saying that if you are only able to see like the Sombrero Galaxy just kind of at edge on, actually the size of the nuclear bulge tells us what the spiral arms are. So in a minute you're going to see we actually classify spiral galaxies based upon their bulge and how tightly wound their arms are. So I'm just going to say the larger the bulge, the more tightly wound the arms are, and it kind of makes sense. So it's like they're tightly wound, and it gives you a bigger bulge. Okay, the smaller the bulge, okay, then we have loosely wound arms, spiral arms. And I mentioned barred spiral galaxies. Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So there's kind of this other sort of catch-all galaxy called a lenticular galaxy. So a lenticular galaxy is not an irregular galaxy, but a lenticular galaxy has the disk and halo component, but you can't see any spiral arms. And this whole idea of having spiral galaxies, elliptical galaxies, irregular galaxies, it's thought that sometimes galaxies can morph between the types. So that was spiral galaxies. Elliptical galaxies, they basically don't have what we call a disk. Basically, elliptical galaxies are only halo. Okay, there's basically no frisbee there. Elliptical galaxies oftentimes are made of old stars, elliptical galaxies. This actually are several elliptical galaxies in a cluster. Okay, this is a giant elliptical galaxy in the middle. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about soon, so this is a single elliptical galaxy. And actually, I think I photographed this not too long ago. I mean, you really don't, it's not as pretty. It's a blob, right? And one of the things about galaxies, like I started to say, is galaxies actually kind of hang out in a cluster. Okay, so that actually, you can kind of get to see the cluster of elliptical galaxies here. So giant elliptical galaxies are relatively rare, but they sure stand out. Dwarf galaxies are more common, kind of like low-mass stars are more common than high-mass stars, but the low-mass stars don't shine too much, so you're not going to see those low-mass red stars. Irregular galaxies tend to be in, like I said, disarray. Now, do you remember when we talked about our Milky Way galaxy? Actually, this large Magellanic Cloud, but if you're like me, they should have nicknamed it something that had the word galaxy in it, okay? Large Magellanic Cloud actually is an irregular galaxy, and it came up in the previous chapter because it's actually a companion to our galaxy. We can't see this object because it's in the southern hemisphere. Drat. So we're actually going to see Edwin Hubble again, a scientist who made some great advancements in kind of what we call cosmology. Cosmology, I'm going to define it here, is basically what is the universe made of? How is the universe structured? But Hubble actually kind of organized these different galaxies on what they call a tuning fork diagram. So can you see it's kind of like, it's one of those things where you hit it and it goes dee. A certain vibration gives you a certain wavelength of note. Where the E actually stands for ellipticals. So we have an ellipticals over here. And then what he did is actually break spirals up from barred spirals. So barred spirals are on the bottom, spirals are on the top. And I kind of mentioned a minute ago the whole how tightly wound the arms are and its nuclear bulge. So actually that's also emphasized here on this slide. So going from right back to left again, actually we have these are loose and these are tight. And when I say loose and tight, I'm talking about their spiral arms. So then actually with regard to the nuclear bulge, this would be a small nuclear bulge, and this would be a large nuclear bulge. And those are spirals. The same thing applies to barred spirals down here. Okay, these are the barred spirals, the same thing. So actually, can you see the little sub letter there? So we kind of end up with this subclassification, okay? The subclassification goes like this, where the C's actually are the most unwound, the loosest spiral arms, the smallest bulge, and the A's are the tightest wound with the larger bulge. Also then, if we turn our attention to the elliptical galaxies here, they actually have a number 2, or number also. Notice that the symbol for ellipticals are E's, the symbol for spirals are S, the symbol for, or the abbreviation for spirals are S, the abbreviation for barred spirals are SB. So this letter for the ellipticals actually say like how eccentric the galaxy is. All right. So like I said, galaxies are kind of hanging out with other galaxies. And I think we ran into this actually in the very first unit of material when we tried to kind of put in perspective where we are in our cosmological address. And so galaxies hang out together in clusters. This actually is, like the slide says, kind of a relatively sparse group of galaxies. Aren't they beautiful? These are generally spiral galaxies, all gravitationally hanging out in a cluster, galaxy cluster. Well, these are all galaxies too. So instead of being spirals, though, these are actually elliptical galaxies. And elliptical galaxy clusters tend to be massive. And actually, I can't remember if it's this chapter or a later chapter, but all of that mass actually can do some cool things with regard to what we call gravitational lensing. So I say they're ellipticals, but to me, just looking at this, the novice that I am, I mean, to me, that looks like a spiral. Okay, a spiral. The ellipticals tend to be kind of reddish. They look kind of orangish here in color. Pretty cool. So galaxies cluster together. They group together. So how far away is a galaxy? Okay, understanding kind of that basic unit of stars being part of a galaxy and understanding how far away the galaxies are and placing those galaxies kind of on a map lets us kind of know what our universe looks like. Now it says our observable universe, okay? Honestly, since there's a delay in how long it takes light to get to us, okay, we do bump up against the edge of our observable universe. We'll talk more about that. But like I said, cosmology is the overall understanding of what the structure of our universe is and how stuff came to be, how it is and where it is in our universe. That's cosmology. I liked what the video said. It kind of talked just briefly, and we'll be talking more about how do we gauge distances. Okay. One way to gauge distances he didn't mention is just simply radar. And radar actually would work for objects in our solar system. Basically, what radar does is send out a signal, look for reflectivity, and how long it takes that signal to come back. You actually can gauge how far away that distance is. Assuming that it's an electromagnetic pulse that you're sending it, you know the speed of light. That's radar. Parallax, we've talked about parallax here, and he kind of said again, you can know that you can see parallax if you hold something close to your face and kind of close one eye and close the other eye. It will dance against the background. And so we actually can, I think when we talked about stars, we can use parallax to gauge the distances to stars. Okay. I don't think we can use parallax to gauge the distances to galaxies. But instead, and actually the video alluded to this, and we'll be talking more about this, what we use to gauge the distances to galaxies actually is to use something called a standard candle. Now there are various standard candles, and they will get you various distances. But basically what a standard candle is something, and we're going to apply it towards clusters of stars in our own galaxy first, and then we're going to apply it to other galaxies. But basically, you know how bright an object is, how bright it's really supposed to be. It's what we call its luminosity. And you compare to how it looks to how bright you know it is, and then you can actually gauge for how far away it must be. This is called the inverse square law, actually looked at before. So there's various candles that we've used to gauge the distances of objects. So the first one, like I said, I want to look at is actually within our own galaxy. We know that there are clusters of stars within the Milky Way galaxy. We actually talked about putting clusters of stars up on an HR diagram. So here are two clusters of stars. We have the Seven Sisters, otherwise known as the Pleiades, and we have the Hyades, which are also kind of in the constellation Taurus. So they're open clusters of stars. You might recognize the turn-off point. These kind of look like they're turning off there. Okay, turn-off point we talked about before. This is just basically an HR diagram. You're like, oh my gosh, I thought we were all done with that. Well, not quite. How do we know it's an HR diagram? Because we have brightness here and we have surface temperature down there. The point is that actually taken two locations or of the two star clusters, we have a location here and a location here. I mean by location like a star. Okay. So what this is saying is that the Hyades are a lot, should be dimmer. The Hyades are a lot brighter, significantly brighter. Okay. They're brighter. You can actually see they're brighter because the higher luminosity. Down here, kind of a analogous star down here, it's dimmer. Okay. The Pleiades. So actually, those should be the same brightness. They're at similar locations on their main sequence. They should be very similar brightnesses if they were the same distance from us. We can use then this idea to understand that the Pleiades must be significantly farther from us, almost 3 times farther from us than the Hyades. Standard candles. So that was 2 clusters of stars within our own galaxy. So now let's look at how do we know how far away a galaxy is? What can we use as a standard candle? Well, one thing we can use as a standard candle in a distant galaxy, this totally slays me. Basically, another galaxy, you are studying a star in another galaxy. It totally amazes me. So one type of star that we did not focus on, but we did talk about how stars leave the main sequence and they actually go in the giant range. While they're there, they can be what we call a variable star. And as a variable star, they will pulsate. And so down here, actually, I have the light diagram of a variable star. Okay, notice that the star is bright, and the star is dim. The star is bright, the star is dim. Bright, dim, bright, dim. Okay, but notice that it's very regular with regard to its pulsing. okay? This is a cycle of 50 days. So the deal is if we can study, again, this just totally floors me that you can study a star in a distant galaxy. The one they picked on was Andromeda, which granted, it's a beautiful galaxy. We can actually maybe even see individual stars. But to study this Cepheid variable star in the Andromeda galaxy, so the thing about the variability is if you, let's see, that was 50 days. If you know the variability, so let's find 50 days on here. This is not linear. So somewhere around here, maybe. Oops, I don't know, maybe here. Okay, if this is 50 days, you can actually, on this chart, go up here and you can knock out what its luminosity is. Remember what luminosity is it basically says how much energy is it pumping out. Luminosity removes the effect of distance. So if you know its luminosity, okay, you can compare its luminosity to its apparent brightness, and you know how much distance is working on it. Okay? So again, we're using it as a standard candle. So the Hubble Space Telescope, the HST that orbits the Earth, actually has done this technique to look at Cepheid variables in distant galaxies, look at how they're pulsating, okay, knock that out or associate that with a particular luminosity of the Cepheid variable, and then compare that to the brightness of the star to get the distance of up to galaxies that are 100 million light years away. That's pretty cool. But we know that the edge of our observable universe is with a B. So the edge of our observable universe is about 13 billion light years from us. So we're getting closer. So that's one standard candle. Another standard candle that will get you a little bit further than the Cepheid variable is something we've talked about. It's just a brighter event than the Cepheid variable. We talked about two types of supernova. We talked about the massive star going supernova, that's a type 2. And then we talked about a 1A supernova, that's a white dwarf supernova, where basically the white dwarf is retired and it has a companion that's dumping on it. If it gets dumped on so that it approaches the Chandrasekhar limit of 1.4 solar masses, it's going to blow up. It's going to basically begin fusing carbon in its core, and it's not set up to do that, so it's going to blow up. The cool thing about the blow up is that we actually know that it's a very standard luminosity. And there again, we have the whole standard candle going for us. And if you're like me, how can they actually see this happen? So actually, I have 3 supernova events, white dwarf supernova events. This is before the supernova event, and then this is after the supernova event. Is that not cool or what? So the way this works is you compare these 2 photos, okay? The before and the after, the before and the after, the before and the after. And look for the explosive little ding, okay? So again, we know the luminosity of a supernova, white dwarf supernova. The luminosity of a supermassive star ending its life via supernova, now that luminosity would vary. This one's pretty much set in stone. So we can compare how bright we know it is versus its apparent brightness to get a fix on its distance. So these are, I don't know if this makes sense to you, do these almost look like they're arranged in order of further away? So this is getting further away, just eyeballing it. Okay, it's getting further away because it's dimmer to us. And that's kind of how we do that. That is so cool. So this ups the ante. These are such energetic events that actually, but they're kind of rare if you ask me. I mean, these are looking at events occurring in other galaxies, right? But we can actually then gauge distances to these galaxies that are up to 10 billion light years away. So that's getting better. That's a more distant standard candle than the Cepheid variable. So I have a little bit of history. I think I probably should have switched some slides around, but back to the Cepheid variable. Actually, it was Edwin Hubble who came up with that tuning fork diagram of galaxies. He actually was the first person to to apply this method, again, of looking at this variable star in the Andromeda Galaxy to get a fix on the distance to the Andromeda Galaxy. Now, it's pretty exciting because before 1924, when they looked at the Andromeda Galaxy, okay, which is Messier object number 31, so when they looked at the Andromeda Galaxy right here, it looks like a nebula. For a while, they were like, I don't know, maybe a nebula, okay? So for the longest time, Andromeda Galaxy was called Andromeda Nebula. Is that not cool or what? Okay. So anyway, when they found out that this object is 2.5 million light years from us, they're like, oh, I guess that's not in our galaxy. Because remember, the biggest dimension of our galaxy is like 100,000 light years, 100,000 light years side to side. Okay, so 2.5 million light years away. I don't think so. So that's pretty cool. So there's Edwin Hubble looking through his telescope. I mean, that is so cool. The older I get, the more I think history is pretty cool. So one of the things, and we're going to revisit, that we talked about clear back at the beginning of the course was that our universe is getting larger. Our universe is expanding. So kind of along those lines, related to its expansion, is Edwin Hubble, when he photographed these, okay, he could actually see that the galaxies were redshifted. Okay, remember when we talked about the Doppler effect? When something's moving towards you, you get a blue shift. When something's moving away from you, you get a red shift. Okay, and so that's the red shift we're talking about. So the farther away a galaxy is from us, from Edwin, from us, the bigger the red shift. That means the faster, what we call the recessional velocity, the faster it is it's moving away from us. So then you kind of see the red shift there. So all galaxies, I say all galaxies, but I really shouldn't be that big about it. There are galaxies within our own cluster that are moving towards us, because I told you that actually Andromeda and the Milky Way galaxy are kind of doing this collision course thing. So that's an example of a galaxy that's not moving away from us. But in general, galaxies in other clusters are moving away from us. So the speed that the galaxies, bless you, are moving away from us, we call this the recessional velocity. Like if you're getting married, you have a procession and then you have a recession, I think, precession before, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. But anyway, you leave, you recess afterwards. You go out for recess if you're a kid at school, okay? So recessional velocity, the going out velocity. I'm going to show you a plot that Hubble put together. So here's Hubble's plot. And we've talked about scatter plots before. The HR diagram was a great scatter plot. The thing about scatter plots is this scatter plot is those black dots are galaxies. They are not stars. Those black dots are actually galaxies. So there is this trend, and scientists get all excited about this. There is definitely this trend in the closer the galaxy, okay, let's kind of go down here to one of these bottom dots. The closer the galaxy is, okay, the slower its recessional velocity. So this is how close it is. The slower we say its recessional velocity. And again, how did they get to how fast it's moving away from us? Well, they did the redshift thing. Okay. Here, let's take a galaxy that is 800 million light years away. Okay. Notice that it is moving faster. So it's farther from us and it's moving faster. Now, like this slide says, notice that you kind of see these dashed lines. Okay, those would be kind of like uncertainty bars. And we do this a lot in science. Basically, it's saying that the more distant the galaxy, we definitely have some spread. But the best thing we can do is draw a line straight through them like that. So it's not perfect. So the bottom line is that if you know from this relationship, you can use use it as a standard curve. If you know the velocity, recessional velocity, you can get to distance. If you know how fast a galaxy is moving from us, you can use this Hubble plot, okay? Say we know it's moving 3 times 3 times 10 to the 4th kilometers per second. That's pretty fast. Okay, then we know that actually its approximate distance from us is, whatever that is, in millions of light years. So this actually kind of goes, and I have a video to show you this, to show you now. But this kind of goes back to the raisin bread. Do you remember the raisin bread? Okay. Where basically our expanding universe, okay, and regardless of, let's just put us on one raisin, the farther away the raisin is, the faster its recessional velocity is from us. So this actually supports an expanding universe. What we've been talking about. If our goal is basically to gauge how far away a galaxy is, we have some options. Of course, I talked about radar. That's like within our solar system. We can kind of gauge how far away the planets are. Parallax we've used on stars, and I don't know if we've necessarily used it on galaxies, but you see it kind of peters out. But we talked about main sequence fitting. That was with the Pleiades and the Hyades, okay? Just kind of comparing, how dim it is compared to what we know its luminosity is. We talked about the Cepheid variables. That was actually the first break in how far away galaxies are with the Andromeda Galaxy. Then we talked about using other distant standards like white dwarfs. Okay, we said how far away can you get, and then there's how far away can you gauge a galaxy is using Hubble's law. So, yeah. Okay, that's a good place to stop, and we'll pick it up again on Friday. There's a good chance we'll definitely knock out this chapter, but not begin the next chapter on Friday. We are kind of bumping up against Thanksgiving at some point.